Do you stay awake at night worried about what could go wrong in your business? Do you worry that maybe you could get sued and that maybe you could lose your personal house or that your bank account could be at risk if something goes wrong in your business? This is a really common concern when people call our firm for the first time. Hi, I'm lawyer Autumn Witt-Boyd, and today's episode and video is going to be going into all of the things that could go wrong with your business and what are some really simple, easy protections that you can put in place now before something goes wrong to make sure that if and when, and I should say it's probably when, the longer you're in business, the more likely it is that something is going to go wrong, that you're ready for it, that you are protected, that you have ways to make sure that you don't lose everything just because someone got hurt at your business or at one of your events or something went wrong and someone is suing your business. All right, standard disclaimer. I am a lawyer. I'm licensed to practice in Tennessee, but nothing in this episode is meant to be legal advice. Please take it just as information. It is meant to get your wheels spinning and get you thinking about things that you might do in your business. If you have particular questions about your business, please reach out, whether it's me or another lawyer. Make sure you get those answered for yourself. All right. So before I dig in, I do want to mention we have kind of a cheat sheet for this episode, a resource for you. So go to our website. You can see it below if you're watching the video. It's awbfirm.com/podcast. We'll link to this in the show notes for this page also if you are listening to this as a podcast. And you will be able to get this cheat sheet. It is going to go through the pros and cons of different kinds of corporate entities. Now, I know that sounds super boring, but that's what we're going to be going over today. I get questions about this all the time. Should I set up an LLC? Do I need a corporation? What's the difference? Am I a sole proprietor? All of that is going to be outlined in this cheat sheet. So you don't have to feel like you have to take notes as we're going through this. Just go to the website, go to awbfirm.com. You'll find this episode. You can get it right there. All right, so the first thing that I want to dig into are what kinds of things could go wrong in your business. If you are new to business, especially maybe if you've never worked in a large corporation or you've never been exposed to some of the things that can go wrong with your business, you may just have no idea. So I want to go over some of the main things that we think about when we think about what do you need to protect your business from going wrong. Here at the AWB firm, we work mostly with online businesses, but they are not immune from being at risk for some of these things. So here's some of the things that we see is if you do have a physical office space where people come visit, like I'm sitting in right now, you run the risk that someone could get injured. They could fall on your steps. They could slip on a little bit of water that got spilled. They could just, through no fault of your own at all, just twist their ankle or something. Anything can go wrong. And now because they were in your space on your what's called premises, now you are open to being sued if they think that they got hurt because, you had a broken step or you let that water sit and didn't mop it up. And so that put them at risk of getting hurt. This is very common. We actually have a client who is a McDonald's franchisee. And, it's just kind of the cost of doing business. People get hurt, whether it is the McDonald's fault or not. In our experience, it has not been, but that doesn't stop someone from, kind of seeing them as a target. So if you do have a physical location where people are coming to visit, clients, customers, you are at risk for being sued if someone is injured. The same thing can happen, and a lot of my online business clients don't think about this, but the same thing can happen if you are hosting a workshop or a conference or a mastermind event. Anytime you are gathering people together in a physical location, so this is really any kind of in-person event. It could be as simple as a meetup at a coffee shop. Now, of course, there's going to be kind of a sliding scale of these risks. If you are hosting a meetup at a coffee shop, obviously you don't own the coffee shop. You're not, responsible for keeping the coffee shop clean, but you have kind of convened people there. And so now you could possibly be sued. Now, none of this means necessarily that someone would win in a lawsuit, but just the fact of being sued is stressful, is expensive. You have to hire a lawyer to defend you. In most courts, you are not allowed to represent yourself if the company is being sued. You have to pay for a lawyer. So it is very expensive, even if you, at the end of the day, win the lawsuit. So we want to go ahead and put some of these protections in place, being aware that, this is just part of doing business. This is one of the risks that you are going to face. So if you are hosting a workshop, a mastermind, maybe you've rented a hotel room or an event center, Again, you don't have to own the facility to still potentially be responsible if something goes wrong. So someone getting hurt either at your office or at a live event, meetup, mastermind, conference, we want to be thinking about that. Another time that I see we have some risk of something going wrong in our business is an employee or a contractor could be running errands for your business. So we see this a lot too with our online business owners who do those in-person events. Maybe you ask someone to go out and get coffee for everyone, or if you're doing a live event, there's a million moving parts. Maybe you need somebody to run copies so that everyone can have their worksheets or, gather different things. If someone else is running errands for your business and they get in a car accident and either they get hurt or they hurt someone else, now again, your business could be sued. Or they could make what's called a workers' compensation claim with the state. So that means that they're basically, that's a whole system that is set up so that if someone is hurt on the job, that's basically your only way to get compensated for your injury. But again, this is where we want to think about things that can go wrong in our business. And I think a lot of us just, again, aren't aware. You send somebody on an errand, you are not necessarily thinking of all the things that can go wrong. And I, for better or worse, see behind the scenes of a lot of large businesses and have seen some of these things go wrong. So that's why I want to kind of give you a preview so that you can just be eyes wide open about all of this. All right, here's something else that comes up, especially with online business. You might use someone else's content the wrong way. So let's say you have a website and you need images for your blog post and you go on Google Images. Now, I've just been talking about this. This is not a good idea. We just did another episode about this, but it happens all the time. If you use an image on your website that you don't have permission to use, that is copyright infringement, and you could now be liable. You could be sued for up to $150,000 per image under our copyright law. So that is a huge amount of damages that most businesses could not pay out if it's just coming from your personal bank account. Something else that comes up that actually I see a lot of, we're actually dealing with a couple of these right now, is a contract dispute. So maybe one of your customers is unhappy with the service that they got from your business. They're demanding a refund. Or maybe you hired someone and you're unhappy with how they've dealt with something. Maybe they've caused injury to your business and you need to sue them. There's lots of different ways that this can show up, but we see client disputes. We see, people thinking they didn't get what they paid for. Even in an online course business, you might get a chargeback. These are all times when, a contract dispute can turn into a legal proceeding, can turn into a dispute that now is costing your business money. So you may say, oh, I'm never going to host a live event. Well, if you're a one-on-one service provider, you could still be at risk of being sued if a customer is unhappy with what they got from you. So what are we going to do with all of these situations? I've told you all the things that can go wrong. Not all of them. There's many, many more, but this is just some ideas to get your wheels turning. Here is what I want you to think about at the beginning, earlier in your business. I don't think this needs to be the first thing you do in your business, but fairly early in your business. I want you to start thinking about what I call building a fence around your business so that if something goes wrong in your business, and your business is sued, you should be signing all contracts in your business's name. You should make sure that your business is the one on the hook legally, not you personally. But if something does go wrong in your business, then someone sues the business, all they can get at, the only assets or money or equipment that they can get to take from you if they win is what the business owns. So for most online businesses, that's really going to be just kind of your bank account. A lot of online businesses don't have a lot of hard assets. You may have some soft assets like intellectual property, your trademarks, your copyrighted materials. But for most online businesses, your main asset is your bank account. It's your cash on hand. Most online businesses are not owning real estate or equipment that could be, taken and sold off to satisfy a debt. So when we build that fence around our business, and we do that by setting up a corporate entity, this is where you've heard about an LLC or a corporation, that builds that fence around your business. And so if something goes wrong, let's say you have $1 million home, or you have a large retirement fund, or money in the bank personally, or maybe you and your brothers and sisters inherited a family farm or something. I'm just making all this up. or maybe you have, a collection of classic cars, or, you could have all kinds of different assets personally. If something goes wrong in the business, they cannot come after those personal assets to pay off your business debt. And so that's what the LLC or corporation is really intended to do. It builds that fence around your business. It will not prevent you from being sued. You still could be sued. If something goes wrong, they're coming after you. But what it does is it prevents the person suing you, if they win, it prevents them from getting at your personal bank account, your personal car, your personal real estate, or any other personal assets you may have. That fence protects. It keeps your personal stuff out. It keeps the business stuff in. So that is the purpose of that. And when we think about what an LLC or corporation does, it doesn't really protect the business as much as it protects your personal stuff. The other thing to remember is if you are sued, let's say you host a live event and something goes terribly wrong and it was your fault. And you now have, $1 million judgment against you. Let's say you have $100,000 in your business bank account. That math doesn't work. So there is more debt than your business has. You may have to declare a business bankruptcy at that point. So an LLC or corporation is not going to stop that. But what it does is if you personally have $1 million in the bank, they can't come after that. Even if, your business could go bankrupt. But you still get to keep whatever you have kind of outside the business. As long as you're following all the right rules, doing everything the right way, that is the real benefit to having an LLC or a corporation. Your business can go bankrupt, but you still get to keep all of your personal assets. So what I want you to think about when you are choosing between the type of entity is what do you really need for your business? What I find is that most of my clients, at least, start their business by themselves or maybe with their spouse or partner. So it typically is, one person or a two person, but it's a family. It's not a real complicated structure. We typically don't see a lot of investors or outside money or, giving employees shares from the beginning. It's typically pretty simple. And so, there's always going to be two sides to the decision of what corporate entity makes the most sense for you. You want to look at it legally and you want to look at it from a tax perspective. So this is where you need to start building your bench of professionals to advise your business, because I may have one opinion or one piece of advice from the legal side, but your tax advisor, your CPA or other tax advisor may look at it differently under the tax laws and say, I know Autumn said this, but I really think this is a better option. And we'll, discuss and decide what, looking at the whole big picture, what makes sense for your business. So you can't just look at it one or the other. You need to look at the whole picture. So I today am only talking about the legal side, but just keep in mind, there can be tax implications with this also. So I'm going to run through the three main entity types that we see, which are sole proprietor, LLC, and corporation. Some pros and cons to those. Again, you do not have to take notes. Go to our website, awbfirm.com/podcast, and you can download our kind of chart comparing all of these different things. So, the first one, and this is kind of the default. So if you don't do anything, congratulations. Once you have accepted money for services or products, you are a sole proprietor, as long as it's just you. If you have a partner, you are what's called a common law partnership or sometimes a general partnership. This is automatic. This is kind of what the state makes you. You get no liability protection if you are a sole proprietor. So that fence I was talking about, building around your business, keeping your personal assets out, you don't get that if you're a sole proprietor. In the eyes of the law, you and the business are one and the same. So you get no protections. Sole proprietor, no protections at all. You are a business. But if something goes wrong in the business, they are coming for your house. They're coming for your cars. They're coming for your personal bank accounts. Even if you just, for some people when they're just starting, because there are costs to forming an LLC or a corporation, and there's ongoing maintenance, there's annual fees, there's taxes. So for some people when they're just getting started, if their risk, like all those things I talked about at the beginning, if their risk is very low, if you're looking at that and you're thinking, I'm not really worried about many of those things going wrong. it may make sense for you to stay a sole proprietor for a little bit because you think the risk of something going wrong is pretty low. There are some costs with forming an LLC or a corporation. So I'm just going to hang out here as a sole proprietor for a little bit. That is your choice. But there are a couple of things you will need to do just to get your business up and running the right way that don't really have anything to do with liability protection. But keep in mind, you may need to get a business license. You should probably still get a federal tax ID number. That's called an EIN, an employer identification number, even if you don't have employees. It's kind of like a social security number for your business. And then you should still be setting up a separate bank account for your business. Those are, again, not really liability protections. Those are just part of running your business the right way. Some of those are really more for tax purposes. And if you're selling products, digital or physical, you may have to collect state sales tax. For all of these things that I just mentioned, if you're staying a sole proprietor, your local SBA, Small Business Administration office, is a great place to find a checklist of what's required, because this is literally different in every state, even down to sometimes counties and cities have different rules. So your friend who's in the neighboring county may have different rules than you do. So check with your local SBA office. They typically will have a checklist or some sort of getting started tool for you that is local. So that's what I want you to do there. But so that is your sole proprietorship. You're still a business. You've still got to follow the business rules, but you don't get any liability protection. So if something goes wrong, you are kind of stuck. All right. The next thing to mention is a partnership. So that's going to basically be everything I talked about with a sole proprietorship. You get no liability protection. If you get sued, they're coming for both of your stuff now. And I think that is pretty risky. So if you do have a partner, I recommend going ahead and, probably setting up a corporate entity, because you're kind of raising your risk level by being involved with someone else that you can't totally control. Okay, now let's move on to what is probably the most popular. This is the one most of my clients are. This is what my business is, and that is an LLC, or a limited liability company. So this is available in every state, and I should have mentioned at the beginning, all of these corporate entities are state law run. So you will have to check with your own state. Usually it's your Secretary of State, but it's called something different in a lot of states. You may want to consult with a local lawyer or a local tax pro to make sure you're making the best choice, because the rules are a little bit different in every state when it comes to LLCs. But just as a general overview, LLCs are the simplest and the easiest types of company to set up and run. There are not a lot of rules and regulations. They're a fairly recent creation. And so they've only been around 10 or 20 years in a lot of places. But the goal with a limited liability company is just to be able to have that liability protection. So if something goes wrong, you still have that fence around your business, but you don't have a lot of paperwork to keep up with. So that's why a lot of people love setting up LLCs, because you don't have to have an annual meeting. You don't have to keep notes and minutes of all your meetings. It can be very casual. You still have to follow. There are some rules you still will have to follow. You'll have to file usually an annual report with your state. You have to pay taxes. You still should be keeping your finances separate, your personal and your business. All of that is what we do to show that we really are running the company like a company. That's how we get that liability protection. We have to keep things separate, and that gives us that protection then. It's called commingling funds. If you are running your personal expenses through your business bank account and paying business expenses from your personal bank account, if it's all just a mess, it looks like you are performing more like a sole proprietorship, where you and the business are one and the same. And so that's when you could lose that fence around your business. You could lose that liability protection if you were sued. You may have heard it's called piercing the corporate veil. And that is what we do not want, because you have paid some money to have the LLC protection. You have, probably put some energy into making sure you're following the rules, paying the fees. So we don't want to lose it. So you need to be sure you're doing things the right way. But with an LLC, it's pretty painless to do things the right way. With an LLC, you may have heard of what's called an operating agreement. That is kind of the agreement between any of the partners in the LLC. They're called members or owners. And And if you have a partner or another co-owner of your company, you will definitely want to have an operating agreement. In most states, it's not required. And if you are the only owner of your business, a lot of times people won't have an operating agreement. It's kind of like having a contract with yourself. Like, do you really need a contract to tell you how you can make decisions? But there are some circumstances where it makes sense. So that, speak with a lawyer, make sure you're doing that the right way. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is a corporation. So you may have heard this called like a C-corp, or just a regular corporation. So this, again, you get the same liability protection, that fence around your business, as you would with an LLC. It's just, there's a lot more paperwork. There's more rules to follow. Like I mentioned, you have to have an annual meeting. You have a board of directors, and you can have shareholders. You can have different people with different kinds of ownership and different distributions of dividends, all of these things. It just, if you do have a more complicated company, it can make sense. There are absolutely instances, especially if you have outside investors who come in at different times, or you want to give your employees some percentage ownership in your company. A corporation can make a lot of sense. But for most online businesses that I deal with, a corporation is really just kind of more hassle than benefit. Now, again, check with your CPA, because in some states, there are enough benefits to being a corporation that it kind of cancels out the additional headache. But for here in Tennessee, we see very few corporations. It's almost all LLCs. So again, state by state, and check with your tax pro to make sure that you are doing things the right way. But with a corporation, you have to be really careful that you're following all of those rules, or you can very easily lose that corporate liability protection. It's much easier to pierce the corporate veil with a corporation, because there are so many more rules, and it's very easy for small business owners who don't have a general counsel or don't have a lawyer helping them. We have a couple of clients that we just take care of all the corporate paperwork every year. We send it to them to sign, but they don't really have to think about it or remember it. If you don't have a lawyer like that who's helping you, it can be kind of a pain. So it's easy to mess up. That's why typically I see clients preferring the LLC. But there are, as I said, sometimes when a corporation makes more sense. The last thing I want to mention, many of you have probably heard of what's called an S-corp. This is something that gets a term that gets thrown around. This is not an actual type of company. It is a way of basically filing your taxes with the IRS. You basically you ask them to treat you as an S corporation. But there's a lot of confusion about this, because you can actually kind of fill out a form and check a box. Even if your entity is an LLC, you can kind of tell the IRS, pretend like I'm an S corporation for tax purposes. And it's a simplified way to get some of the tax benefits that corporations do, while still keeping the simplicity of the LLC as your actual corporate entity. So I know it's confusing. You can still be an LLC and file your taxes as an S corp, or you can be a corporation and file your taxes as an S corp. But that is an IRS designation. It is not a legal entity. Check with your CPA. Not all companies qualify. There are some rules for filing your taxes as an S-corp. So this is definitely a CPA conversation. But here's the reason. I'll walk you through, and I will tell you, I went to law school, so I wouldn't have to do math, but I have to do it sometimes now. Anyway, I'm just going to walk you through at a high level why some companies choose to file their taxes as an S-corp, why that can save them a little bit of tax dollars. So if you are an LLC or a sole proprietorship or a general partnership, any of those, the IRS basically, your company doesn't exist. All of the profits that the company sees flow through to your personal tax return. It's basically treated as income. So the company, the LLC or the sole proprietorship or the general partnership, the company does not pay any federal income taxes. So the company, they call it a disregarded entity. It's like it doesn't exist. They ignore it. So you as the owner basically are taxed personally on all of the profits of your business. So you're not taxed on the whole revenue. You can subtract some expenses, what you pay contractors or employees, what you pay for office supplies or rent or all of those things. You subtract to get to that bottom line profit number. You're taxed on the whole profit, even if you didn't pay that all to yourself, even if it's still sitting in the business bank account. And that's, again, if you're a sole proprietorship, an LLC, or a general partnership. The other thing is you, as the owner, pay what's called self-employment tax. So if you are an employee, if you're working a W-2 job for somebody else, for a big company, for Microsoft or Google, or a small company, anytime you're a W-2 employee, the employee and the employer split certain federal income taxes. But if you're self-employed, you pay them all. There's no employer to pay some of them for you. So what filing as an S-corp does is you basically put yourself on the payroll as an owner. And now the company pays part of that self-employment tax because now you're a W-2 employee. And you can basically reduce the amount of income tax that you pay because now that little bit of income tax that the company is paying is now deducted as an expense. So the company's profits are lower because you got to subtract that as an expense. So that will sometimes make your overall tax bill lower because you can pay yourself a salary that you're paying those income taxes on. And then you can also pay yourself as an owner distributions that are taxed differently. So again, I went to law school, so I wouldn't have to do math. Talk to your CPA about this. It really is just a calculation that you may want to do once a year, once every 2 years as your business starts to grow. What I have found, just as a rule of thumb, is that until your business is making around 6 figures or more, there's typically not enough savings in taxes to make it worth the extra amounts that you have to pay to have a corporate entity, to be on payroll, to have your CPA doing all of these, all of this work, and your lawyer. Typically, I find that it kind of cancels out until you get to that 6-figure mark. And even if you're above it, in some states, the calculation can be different. For example, I live in Tennessee where we do not have a state income tax, but we do have a tax on return on investment. So that's like the distributions that you would get. So my law firm is a mid six figure law firm, but I asked my CPA this year, does it make sense for us to start filing as an S-corp? And he said no. And that's because of the weird tax rules in Tennessee. I think we're kind of borderline, but it's a question I keep asking, and he'll run the calculations and we'll look at it and talk about it. But so this is definitely something, it is not one size fits all. Just because your friend with her business is filing as an S-corp, your books may look different or your state may be different. So it is not, a gold star to say, oh, now I'm filing as an S-corp. It really just depends on your personal business, whether it will actually save you money or not. It is just math. So again, the thing to remember with an S-corp is it's not really your legal entity. You can be an LLC or a corporation and file as an S-corp. It's really just for taxes. All right. The last thing I want to touch on before I sign off is we've been talking about legal protections, building the fence around your company's assets. But as I mentioned, if something goes wrong in your business and you're sued and it's for much more money than your business has to pay, your business could go bankrupt. And so the LLC or the corporation having that in place will not stop that from happening. And so the way that you protect your business and yourself against that is with insurance. And insurance is just, it's something you buy. It is a contract between you and the insurance company that you say, if this goes wrong, I'm going to pay you premiums every year. And I'm going to hope that nothing goes wrong. But if something goes wrong, the insurance company kind of swoops in and they pay it for you. The other huge benefit of insurance is that if you are sued, usually if that claim falls within your insurance policy, usually the insurance company will pay for an attorney to actually defend you in that claim. That's a huge benefit because often your attorney's fees are going to be more than really what's even at issue in the claim. It's incredibly expensive to be sued or to sue someone. And so having that ability, not to have to use your own business's cash flow to defend yourself in a lawsuit is a huge advantage to insurance. So I kind of say, having an LLC or corporation and insurance, they're like two sides of the same coin. They are protecting your business in slightly different ways. But when we think about that list, I said at the beginning of all the things that can go wrong, insurance as a backstop is really sometimes more helpful, frankly, than having an LLC. And the last thing, there's lots of different kinds of insurance. I recommend that you find someone local that you can sit down with and talk to about your business, tell them all the different things that you're doing, so that you can make sure you get the right coverage, because this is another one of those where every business is a little bit different. If you're a life coach, but you're not doing in-person events, maybe you need one kind of coverage. If you're a life coach who's doing, a mastermind a month, or renting out a huge conference center for having a 100-person event, you need a different kind of coverage. So it's really individualized. You need to make sure you get the right coverage. The last thing I want to mention is that certain professionals, lawyers are one of them, CPAs, doctors, even if they form an LLC or a corporation, if they do something wrong, they will be sued individually, because it's, their personal problem. Basically, if I do something wrong as a lawyer, I'm going to get sued for malpractice. That I can't form a company to shield me from that. That is an individual, basically, problem. So really the only backstop there is insurance. And so you do sometimes see professionals who don't have a corporate entity, because really the biggest risk, and I know this is true for lawyers, when I was a solo lawyer, I had no employees, I had no office space. I did not have a corporate entity because my biggest risk was malpractice. And the only way to protect against that is insurance. Forming an LLC does not help. And so you do see sometimes, businesses that are larger or that you would expect to have a corporate entity who may not, because their biggest exposure is really the professional issue of malpractice. Now, as they grow, as you open an office, as you hire employees, your risk changes. And so now that I do have employees, I do have an office space, now I could be sued for employment discrimination, or I could be sued for someone slipping and falling at my office. So now my only risk is not just that I do something wrong as a lawyer. I have other risks. And so the LLC then becomes important in addition to insurance. But so that's just something I wanted to mention. If you do fall in one of those professional categories where really what you're doing is kind of providing advice and you are trained and licensed, a corporate entity may or may not be right for you. All right. I hope this was helpful. Again, the last thing I want to mention is go get that cheat sheet so you can look at the different pros and cons of different types of entities. That's at awbfirm.com/podcast. And I will talk to you guys next week. Have a good one.